Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm very thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest Kristin Snyder, who's a partner at Debevoise. Kristin, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Richard. It's great to be here.
So, Kristin, you have one of the more unusual backgrounds, and I reached out to you because I, like yourself, started my career as an IP lawyer, and I'm just so curious about how you went from being an IP lawyer, looks like a very successful being IP lawyer, to being interested in joining the SEC. So, tell me about that.
So you are also a recovering IP lawyer. That's right. So you're right. I spent the first 7 or so years of my career doing kind of hard IP litigation
Yeah,
cases. Don't have a technical background. So the idea when I joined I first joined an IP boutique and then moved over to Sidley. But when I joined, the idea with the IP program and a non-technical person was that if we were going to explain something to a judge or a jury, if I didn't understand it, then the judge or
yeah.
jury also likely wouldn't. And I was really fortunate, I think, as a young lawyer in IP, got a lot of opportunities to take depositions, have stand-up work in court.
Hmm.
And when the SEC, I had a good friend who happened to be at the local San Francisco office of the SEC, and she said that they were looking for lawyers that had not necessarily securities backgrounds, but just who had deep experience taking depositions, because in a regional office like San Francisco at the SEC, it's difficult for those offices to have the resources to really train kind of basic skills for lawyers. And so the idea was that you could learn the law, but if you had those technical skills like the deposition training or stand-up experience in court, that was something that they were really looking for. And right before I went to the SEC, my firm had sent me to the district attorney's office in San Francisco to get some trial experience, because often my patent cases would settle on the courthouse steps. And
Right.
so having returned to public service, for a very short stint when I was at the district attorney's office, the idea that I could run my cases and kind of look at the issues and make a determination, not necessarily based on a position that I had to take, but one that, I could evaluate all the evidence and decide whether to recommend that the commission bring a case or not, was really appealing to me. And so I thought I would go for a couple of years to the SEC and, do enforcement work. And as it turned out, I ended up staying for 18 years because the
Yeah,
job
that's
was very
amazing.
interesting.
Well, wasn't that a pretty steep learning curve? I assume you didn't know a lot about public SEC corporate filings and stuff like that being an IP lawyer.
I knew nothing. I knew very little, only in the sense that if our client was a public company, which they often were in our patent cases, we would look at the 10Ks or Qs, at times for risk factors. Um, but aside from that, I really didn't know the law. And
Yeah.
what I learned, though, is that on each SEC case, because back in the day when I joined, now there are specialized units where many folks can, specialize in a particular area. But when I joined in 2003, it's kind of one of the post Enron hires. I was thrown in and did a whole mix of different cases. And so in each of the SEC investigations, I felt like not only were you learning the law, but you were also learning, becoming an expert or learning about the business of the company or
Mm.
the firm that you were investigating. And I don't know that that changes. That's still the case, that you can definitely specialize now at the SEC, but you're still, I think there's a learning curve each time you're taking on a new investigation.
Well, weren't all your IP colleagues like scratching their heads and puzzled about why you would join the SEC? I mean, it'd be more logical for you to join the patent office than the SEC.
True, true. Yeah, no technical background, so I couldn't join the PTO.
Yeah.
But I think at the inflection point where I was in my career, I was a seventh year associate, and I was either going to make a push and a run for partner at that
Right.
stage, or go off and maybe try something different. And so it was a nice point in my career. I feel like things never quite happen the way you're expecting them to, but oftentimes it ends up being better than what you expected. So
Mm.
when I left, I had just recently joined Sidley because the small patent boutique that I had been with for my first 6 or so years of my career had dissolved. It was kind of a footnote to the Brobeck story. It was maybe a little bit of a victim of the tech bubble.
Yeah.
And so that also got me thinking about maybe doing something different. And Sidley was a great firm. I really enjoyed my time there. But at the same time, I think, just given where I was in my career and the idea that maybe I could try something different was very appealing to me.
Yeah. Well, how did you like being the SEC? Obviously, you stayed for 18 years, so you must have liked it. What did you like it better than patent litigation?
Patent litigation was amazing, and I highly recommend that to any young lawyer who's considering a career. It's very exciting and interesting. However, I will say, at the and I did worry about that because the patent cases were challenging, especially
Yeah.
someone without a technical background having to learn new technology. But the SEC also provided a very, kind of interesting platform to develop a career, and I think that's still true to this day.
Hmm.
Um, Again, I thought I would go in. I didn't know what to expect, but what I found was a group of really smart, dedicated lawyers, and it was a lot of folks who had come from law firms, some who had also been in IP. Interestingly enough, when I joined the commission, and there were a lot of opportunities to kind of be the steward of your own career and to try to follow things that you found interesting. And so I spent my first 8 years at the commission and enforcement, got to do a whole variety of different cases, was a manager for a bit on the enforcement side, then also became kind of the training coordinator in our San Francisco office on the enforcement side. And then a position popped open about 8 years into my career that was running the entirely different side of the office, the examination side, which was, there were some lawyers in that program, but it was primarily made up of accountants and examiners. And those folks were actually going out into the world and interfacing directly with registered entities. So advisors, broker dealers, transfer
Mhm.
agents.
Mhm.
And I had done enough work, I think, with that side of the office with exam referrals that I was really, my interest was piqued. And again, not a career move that I expected to make, but one of the best decisions that I made was switching to
Mhm.
that side of the office.
Mhm.
But I'll
Did you
stop
end up
talking.
no,
Yeah.
well, did you end up trying a lot of cases at the SEC? Because I know that was one, isn't that one of the reasons you wanted to go there, or what was this case there?
I took a lot of testimony and I had a lot of autonomy over my investigations, but the way that most regional offices, as well as the home office at the SEC and enforcement are structured, there are trial attorneys. And so they're in a separate group and they kind of come in and pick up the investigations after the staff has
Mm.
recommended that an action be brought and the commission has signed off on that action.
Mm.
Then the trial lawyers come in and the staff attorneys do remain involved. And so I
Mm.
definitely remained involved. Many of my cases settled, though. I think it's a pretty high percentage of cases that actually settle before they go to trial. I had
Yeah.
one matter where we were literally on the courthouse steps with some of the individuals and we ended up settling. So
Yeah.
I never actually got the opportunity to go to trial.
Mm. Oh, interesting.
I did get the opportunity to appear in court and do a number of different court proceedings, as well as I would say hundreds of SEC testimonies.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
from that perspective, it was an excellent opportunity to develop skills.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, let me go back. What made you decide to go into IP law in the first time? You mentioned that you didn't have a technical degree, which of course a lot of IP lawyers do, as do I. That's why I went into it. So, what made you go into that in the first place?
I took a class in law school. I didn't go into law school thinking that that was the direction that I would take. I
Uh-huh.
actually thought that I would do something either public service or criminal law related. And most
Yeah.
of the internships that I had prior to, picking IP were criminal focused, criminal law focused. And then I took a class my third year of law school and completely changed direction. I was
Oh,
fascinated by the
oh.
intellectual property class. And that's another thing, you go into, it's another example of you go into something thinking, oh, you're going to take one path and then you learn something new and takes you in a
Yeah.
different direction. And I'm really glad it did. What I found in IP is, and hopefully you did too, the technology was always fascinating. And you were always learning about something new and cutting edge. And the clients were so interesting in terms of the innovations and what they were developing. So, I think that really appealed to me, and especially being based here in the Bay Area and really in the heart of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
It was an exciting time, to be coming out of law school. It was in the late 90s when I came out, pre-tech bubble, but there was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm in the Valley.
Yeah, for sure. So after spending 18 years at the SEC, sounds like you really enjoyed it. What made you decide to now go back to private practice?
It was time, 18 years, 18 years is a long time. I felt like I had done a lot at the commission and really enjoyed my time. I have tremendous respect for the agency,
Uh-huh.
but I just got to a point where I thought, am I going to finish out my career at the SEC, or will I try something new? And this wonderful opportunity through Debevoise came to me. I didn't feel so, I felt very comfortable kind of transitioning over. Debevoise has so many lawyers who've actually been at the commission. Lawyers I really, really respected. So Mary Jo White, who was the SEC chair during the Obama administration, is one of our, kind of marquee white collar partners. And then Andrew Seresny, who is our division director for the Division of Enforcement. Julie Reevy, who was the head of the asset management unit, Rob Kaplan, who's the head of the asset management unit, Kara Brockmeyer, who headed up the FCPA unit. So there were just tremendous wealth. And I'm just scratching the surface. There are other
Yeah.
folks, Charu Chandrasekhar, who was head of retail strategy task force. They're just a very tremendous, talented group who I knew would understand what it was like transitioning out of the government, where you have one client that you can't bring with you,
Yeah.
to the law firm. And they really had a plan for me, going in, and have been so generous, kind. It's been a delightful place. I think we have tough jobs, and we have to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
tough adversaries, but it's tremendous when you like the people that you work with. And that is incredibly true. And I think we're one of the last, if not the last, lockstep firm in the country. So
Mhm.
what that means is, I looked at what are the financial incentives that folks are going to have as partners, and what are the incentives, to work together. And so I think having that mindset, that lockstep mindset where, we don't spend any time thinking about compensation, in terms of who's getting what, because it's just fixed. Um, that really fosters a lot of teamwork and making sure that you're getting the right people in front of clients. And so that teamwork aspect really felt very much like being at the government, where you would come together and kind of do what was best, for your client, the commission. Here, I feel like we come together and we do what's best for the firm's clients.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So what is your practice like now? How's it evolved? Are you doing mostly SEC stuff or a much broader range?
It is mostly SEC stuff. It is a range. So in our white collar practice, I feel like there's quite a range. So you have, I would say that my practice really skews toward regulatory work. Maybe 1/3 of my practice is sort of regulatory work, where clients are calling and saying, can we do this? Or is this going to be a problem with the SEC down the road? Another part of the practice is working behind the scenes on SEC exams. So if a client
Mm.
is being examined, often we will be in the background kind of helping guide and advise them as they make their way through the exam process. And then the other part of the practice is front facing with the SEC and enforcement investigations. And it's varied, just like it was at the commission. So no one day is the same. We do, it can be a mix of projects from like the regulatory ad hoc advice that I mentioned, which can be quick, to internal investigations. So, and then also, just again, more front facing work with the SEC. I think that differs from some of the other folks in the white collar practice. Some are former AUSAs, so they're doing more criminal defense work. So it's a nice mix of practice areas. And especially in San Francisco, I have two other white collar partners, Josh Cohen and David Surratt, and we work together on some things, but then they also have more of a criminal defense practice. So I feel like we kind of cover the waterfront, but it keeps it interesting, not only for me, but I think also for our associates, who get a mix of experience based on, all the variety of things that we have going on.
Do you miss patent litigation?
So I think you talked to my partner, Jay Newcomb, and I
Yeah.
have to say that I do sometimes like to go geek out with Jay, and then another partner, Abe Tabai. And the only tombstones that I have in my office are from my patent cases from a million years ago. So I feel like I need better swag in the group that I'm in right now.
He
Yeah.
can always turn to you if he needs a good patent claim reviewed or something.
There you go. Yeah. Give me a good claim chart any day, and I'm happy to go through it.
Well, Kristen, this has been a fascinating conversation. I loved how you made the transition to the SEC, and I'm so glad it worked out. And it sounds like you have a fantastic practice now at Debevoise.
Oh, thanks again for having me. This was so much fun.
This is Richard Hsu and Kristin Snyder. Thanks.